very good piece on my father was sent to me actually
Oh, when?
um, 2 days ago.
Oh, I'd like to look at that in a minute. But let me start at the very beginning, as they say. I know that you were born in America because you told me the other day, but for the recording, start your life at the beginning.
So I was born in America in 1937, 11th of November. My dad was working for MGM Films. He was a scriptwriter there. He was an up and coming young writer in those days. And my mother had been to Paris and been a student at the Parisian Sorbonne area to some of the best teachers she could find. So these two young, ever so keen people, she had an American passport because she'd also been born by chance in America, could be together in Hollywood where we lived. And my father got particularly well known because he knew, what's it, the guy who wrote the best book at the time. They made a film. Um, Sorry, this will happen. My mind
No,
goes empty.
not well, but you will, just for the record,
Oh,
just. Uh,
Redwood played him in this role as a young Mr. Allgood or Richard Gatsby.
oh, the great guy. Oh, he knew
So who
Scott
wrote?
F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Oh,
So my father worked alongside Scott Fitzgerald and got to know really everybody. All
mm,
the writers at that time were going to
mm,
Hollywood
mm,
because that's where the
yeah.
money and the interest was. And so he got to meet everybody.
Mm,
And being a very wanting to be a rich somebody,
mm,
my mother had inherited a bit of money. John began just spending it like water,
mm,
entertaining, until it reached a point when she realized that they couldn't survive
mm,
like that. You know, even with good salaries, you
mm.
couldn't survive like that. So when I was probably about one, they brought me back to England. Also because there was a presentiment of war.
Mm,
I don't think they liked the idea of not being home for the war.
mm.
So that was interesting.
So that would have been 1938, the end of
Yes,
1938.
something like that.
Just so that it's on the recording, just say the names of your mum and your dad.
Yes, so John Davenport, who ended up being the, the lead critic for The Observer for, I think, three different very highbrow magazines. He also founded the Third Talk program. He was also the man who did the very first interior of a woman's magazine dedicated to um, creativity in plays and writers and things with Vogue magazine.
Okay.
So he worked in Vogue. Women adored him, and he was a drunk. He had been known when he was young as being a great pugilist, and he used to love boasting that he could fight anybody. But of
Especially when.
course, drink fought him. Poor man. Pretty disastrous character. And he died of drink when he was about 56, I think it was, some years later.
When you say died of drink, you mean like cirrhosis or something like that? What did he actually die of?
Of liver, whatever it's called.
Cirrhosis is what
Cirrhosis,
kills drinkers, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, and your mum's name? Your mother's name?
My mother was known then as Clemency Hale, Hale. And because she had a twin sister and they were both 5'11", and made of glorious, strong material. They broke all, they were speedos together. They broke every record in the book for sports and inhalation of breath and all that. And my mother happened to be terribly good at cricket. So she's the first woman ever to play in a man's team in England. And when they went to play in that dreaded school, not Harrogate, the one near Windsor, Eton.
Yes.
They refused to play the team because they had a woman in it.
Mm.
And she had to sit outside and watch her team getting demolished.
Mm.
But if she had been on there, she would have hit sixes all over the place. Yes, she was a fantastic specimen, really. Beautiful woman. So the ball, they bought a little house in Marshfield, just down the road from here.
Mm.
And it became a centre of music and books and so on. So people like Dylan, Tom, everybody my father met, which was everybody really, used to try and get a lift down there to spend a weekend. It's always crowded with people. And a lot of them would go down to the pub. Even now, the very old people who can remember them arriving, getting stoned out of their mind, particularly Thomas, who, was always...
Yes, he was a famous drunk as well, wasn't he?
But Caitlin would come and she always made a very nice setting for us younger ones. She was a nice woman. So for a few years that road the war built, my grandmother, who had looked after the transport of food, was in charge. Hope Hoover's government was it at that time? The transportation of food from America to England, because she had been a lead suffragette, so she knew Roosevelt and Eleanor.
Sorry, who'd been a suffragette? Who had been a suffragette?
My grandmother.
Oh, okay. What was her name?
She didn't call herself suffragette. They called themselves, I don't know, modern women or... But she talked all over America. She was known as Beatrice Forbes Robertson Hale.
Right.
That's her name. Hale was the American marriage name. Forbes Robertson was her acting family that she came from. And she had been an actress. And she went over to America acting and met Bob. And they had 3 children. And she drank. That's all the men in my family drink. And all the women leave them because they can't cope with it. And go through difficult times as a result. And all the children have memories of drunken men. So it's a rather miserable background. I do like men though.
That's nice.
I really do. I do sympathise with them. I do think the loss of having a recognition of where you're at in your life, which we deny men, is terrible. Worst thing you can do. We should be like tribal people, get cut or whatever.
Have particular things that mark the stages of your life.
Yeah.
Yes.
Would make such a difference, which would include serving the country in some form or other. So I wander away.
No, that's good. That's good. I mean, one of the the things that we have is a bar mitzvah, which is a marker in your life, and some other cultures have something a bit like that.
Yes, they do.
But Englishners not.
And we're the ones who most need it, I think, because we've... Anyway, the war got closer. My father did work in a French service at the BBC because he had impeccable... How he got impeccable French, I don't know, but he did speak impeccable French. So he worked in a French service.
This is the World Service, or what became the World Service?
Yes, it was the founding of it. And so I was lucky I got to know some really fantastic people from those services. They divorced when I was 4 because my mum fell in love with somebody else. And her best friend, who was another whole story, told her to leave my father because he recognized that John would not be able to change who he was. And he was destroying my mother's gift of art and creativity and ability and being a woman and dreadful. So she thought she'd found that in William Glock, who was her second husband, who eventually became head of the BBC, comptroller of music. a very VIP person indeed. And that was not a good marriage either. That lasted another 8 years. So she had myself, my sister with John, and my third sister, Oriel, with William, and found William's next wife, who
She
became
found him his next wife
Yes.
so that
Well,
she could move on.
She felt it was her fault. Women take things on rather seriously. Felt it was her fault that the marriage hadn't worked. In fact, it wasn't, as I found out much later. And so she looked around, and there was Anne Balfour, whose husband had died on the very, very last day in Hong Kong after the war, accidentally shot when he'd survived the whole war. She found this wonderful woman who was half English, half French, who loved the idea of marrying William, who had a voice. She was a chanteuse and was bound to be given some concerts, and found herself married to this man who climbed and climbed and climbed up. He was an extremely good musician.
What did he play?
William.
What did he play?
Piano. He studied a Schnabel. So he was the first man at the BBC to bring women composers, for example, to bring European music over. He was the first man to play Mozart in London, since Mozart was here. And he actually, in his time, was considered, he was a great person in getting all these things moving, encouraging young composers. The first time we had new operas by English people. Unheard of.
Now that reminds me to mention that you did say that you met Benjamin Britten.
Yes, of course. And when I was a child, I knew everybody, and I thought that was normal. I thought everybody knew everybody. It didn't seem odd. We go down to John Piper's house on the river, and I'd see his latest beautiful work of art. They were the people, they all knew each other. In those days, we lived in Hampstead in London. We all knew each other. It was a very small community. And of course, Hampstead was rich in all the refugees who came in. So we had all the poets and painters and musicians, and they all clubbed together. Nobody had any money. I mean, I slept in the kitchen. And most evenings, when my mum got back from work, there'd be 10, 12 people gathering because they needed a cheap meal and they needed to talk and meet each other. It's a bit like living in Europe.
Yeah.
Not like living in London. And I used to wander the streets looking into the windows of so-called ordinary houses, envying the two little people sitting by the fire with their parents. They're envying their normality. I thought my normality was a bit over the top. But it meant as a child I was taken to see first shows. My mother got a job being the main scene painter at Covent Garden Opera House. So when I was at home in holidays, I went to I watched Margot Fontaine become first ballerina, and all the visiting wonderful troops we got from Russia, and all that excitement at that time when things were opening after the war. So exciting. And I heard great music, heard fantastic voices. I took it for granted. So I was given an education really without deserving it, and loved it. And when we went out together as a family, we'd go to see the latest exhibition of art, or it was always something interesting, or somebody that we wanted to talk to. Little pause here.
Would you like a little pause?
I think so.
All right, let's